This is our February 25th, 2025 board meeting, and we're going to start off tonight with some public comments. Jill will announce the names of the speakers, and as a reminder, 3 minutes to speak. We have a timer that will go off when your time is up.
We're going to start with Laura Vineyard. Yes, please.
Okay. Great. My name is Laura Vineyard, and I'm a parent of a child at South Hill Elementary, and I'm here to speak in support of the PTA's air purifier program. Currently, the chronic absenteeism rate for ICSD is 25% for 2024 compared to 16% for 2019, while the board's vision of success is a rate below 10%. The current rate for students with disabilities is 36%. That for economically disadvantaged students is nearly 40%. In Black students, we have 47%, and Hispanic and multiracial students, it exceeds 30%. All of these are higher than the 2019 rates. Why might this be the case? Poor health is one of the main factors contributing to chronic absenteeism. The EPA has compiled extensive evidence supporting the correlation between indoor air quality and student performance, and even teacher retention. In a review of 11 students evaluating the association between ventilation rates and student performance, higher rates of ventilation led to improvements in academic performance ranging from 2.2% to more than 15%. In 8 of the 11 studies, there was an association between inadequate ventilation rates or elevated carbon dioxide concentrations and decreases in at least one metric of student performance. Another study from 2020 showed that increasing ventilation rates in classrooms could significantly improve learning performance and pupil attendance. The EPA notes that controlled studies show that children perform schoolwork with greater speed as ventilation rates increase. The performance of adults, including teachers and school staff, has also been shown to improve. Chronic absenteeism can have long-term negative impacts on learning and other educational outcomes, resulting in massive societal and economic costs. Higher absenteeism results in lower graduation rates, reduced workforce productivity, and increased need for remedial education, resulting in a loss of potential future earnings for individuals and society as a whole. Additionally, schools may face higher direct costs, like needing to hire substitute teachers to cover absent teachers. There's also opportunity costs associated with teachers having to shift their focus to make up the learning loss due to illness, either to their own or that of their students. Increasing the time they must spend preparing alternative lesson plans while reducing the amount of material they can cover. As we all know, as of 2024, 4 of the schools in our district have lost their good standing with New York State due to low performance, particularly among students of color. Addressing a key driver in absenteeism, namely illness, and the associated impact on educational outcomes of inadequate ventilation is an opportunity to improve a vital metric that disproportionately impacts less advantaged members of our community. 3 air changes per hour in our classrooms is simply not enough to prevent illness transmission. The Board of Education must act by permitting air purifiers in the classroom to improve our children's health and educational outcomes. Thank you.
Wow,
Good timing.
very good.
Thank you. You get the prize. Next is Casey McGrath.
Hey, my name is Casey McGrath, and I'm a parent of a child at South Hill. And I'm also here to speak in support of the PTA's petition to put allow air purifiers in classrooms. This topic is especially timely for me as my son and I just recovered from the flu, which he caught in his 2nd grade classroom at South Hill. His case of influenza developed into pneumonia, resulting in 10 days with a fever, which reached 106.8 degrees. He missed school, I missed work, and we have both missed out on planned vacation, family, and social activities. This is the worst year for influenza in nearly 15 years, and the first year since the pandemic that influenza deaths have outpaced COVID-related deaths. These illnesses are not temporary, they are not going away, and they can be serious for both children and adults. ICSD classrooms currently average ventilation of 10 liters per second per person, which is equivalent to 3 air changes per hour. This is only half the recommended levels by ASHRAE for infectious disease control, which recommends 6 air changes per hour. Following these guidelines has been shown to reduce illnesses by up to 82%. Acute respiratory illnesses are also one of the leading reasons that students miss school. Based on the results of a 2013 study, increasing the ventilation rates at ICSD to the ASHRAE standards could reduce illness-related absences by 16%. In addition, better classroom filtration would have the added benefit of reducing volatile organic compounds, particulate matter, mold, and allergens, which also contribute to health issues. For students and staff with asthma or other chronic conditions, allergies, and sensitivities, this could mean fewer missed days of school, less medication, fewer asthma attacks, and trips to the hospital. The pandemic taught us that acute respiratory illnesses like COVID-19 can have long-lasting effects. Long COVID affects 10 to 20% of children, and the risk continues with reinfections. This can present as poor sleep and fatigue, problems with learning, cognition, and memory, and a reduced ability to fight off future illnesses for 6 to 18 months. While vaccination can lower these risks somewhat, vaccination rates are lagging. Less than 20% of kids are up to date on their COVID vaccines, and influenza vaccination rates among children have reached a 12-year low. Incidentally, both my child and I did receive our flu shots this year, going to show you that vaccination alone is not enough to protect individuals from these diseases. Even if just a few percent of the children in our district go on to develop long-term health problems, that's a huge impact on our children and our community. Adding air purifiers to our classrooms is a key step in improving the health and well-being of our students. It's something that I believe most parents and teachers would support, and there is a clear scientific evidence that it can improve both health and educational outcomes for children. At a time when science and public health are under attack by our nation's leaders, we need our local leaders and the Board of Education to stand up and do the right thing to protect our children and community. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Erica Woodrock.
Hello, my name is Erica Mudrak. My children attend South Hill Elementary School. I'm also speaking in favor of the Air Purifier Initiative. I've been sick with 3 seasonal illnesses this winter. Fortunately, my job provides me with reasonable sick leave as well as flexible work from home options. Teachers and other academic staff do not have that luxury. Adding air purifiers is a disability, justice, equity, and inclusion issue. Schools are a major driver of infectious diseases in our community. A nationwide study found that more than 70% of all household cases of COVID arose from a child exposed at school. This finding applies to other respiratory illnesses such as RSV, influenza, and pneumonia, which we have been spreading in our local community this year. ICSD data shows that students of color, students with disabilities, and those who are more economically disadvantaged have significantly higher chronic absenteeism rates. We also know that families with a medically vulnerable member bear a much higher risk when a child brings home an illness from school. The current approach to school illness management requires the burden to be carried by those at risk, even though the spread of respiratory illness is community-driven. As the U.S. Secretary of Education noted last year, chronic absenteeism derives from multiple interconnected factors. Some of these factors are lack of access to student and family supports and student-family health challenges. We should keep in mind the impact of long COVID and post-viral conditions here. Research has shown that rates of post-viral illness are higher among racial ethnic minorities, students with disabilities, among the neurodiverse, and women between 30 and 50 years of age. We cannot ignore this increased health burden that some members of our community carry from a lack of action on this issue. In Tompkins County, 59% of Black workers earn below the living wage compared to 35% of white workers. There are also gender disparities. 41% of women make less than living wage compared with 34% of men. It stands to reason that when caregivers are earning an hourly wage for whom access to paid time off when ill is often not possible, that students from these families might be most impacted when illness is brought home from school. Additionally, these are the same frontline workers who also have higher rates of long COVID due to not having access to work from home options in 2020. Preventing illness is not a trivial matter. For many in our community, it can be a matter of life or death, or a risk of hospitalization for our medically vulnerable and disabled community members. We can choose to ignore this risk and leave these families with the individual responsibility to protect themselves at a time when very few still wear a mask, Or we can see this as a systemic issue, deserving of a systems-level intervention that is inclusive of our disabled and medically vulnerable members. Let's bring back the spirit of community care by lifting this ban on air purifiers in our classroom. Allow our PTAs and teachers to act when they are able. Air purifiers in some spaces now are better than no action at all. Thank you.
Thank you. Irie Coletti?
Hello, my name is Ari Coletti, and I am also a parent of 2 children at South Hill Elementary. I also, with Casey, just had my second grader go through 10 days of the flu, hitting fever of 105. So a recent publication found that for every dollar spent on improving indoor air quality in the classroom to meet ASHRAE 241 guidelines, over $9 is saved. These savings come primarily from lower healthcare costs and doesn't even begin to account for the expense of paying for substitute coverage when teachers are ill. Reducing staff illness reduces medical expenses, lowering the risk of complications from pre-existing or chronic health conditions such as asthma, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, or autoimmune conditions. These chronic health conditions also make one more vulnerable to the effects of respiratory illnesses such as influenza, RSV, pneumonia, and COVID-19. As ICSD is self-insured for employee health benefits, when employees are sick more often, the district sees a direct increase in expenses, also directly impacting the school budget. The 23-24 budget for health benefits was over $24.7 million. The 24-25 budget was over $25.6 million. In the ICSD preliminary financial report from the June 2023, the district is quoted as saying, School district management continues to be concerned with potential future increases in employee benefits. The report goes on to note the nationwide staffing challenges that were also impacting ICSD in a very significant way. Further noting that realistic predictions for expenditures and revenue needs are nearly impossible under the current conditions. It is also noted that healthcare costs are expected to increase between 3 to 7% annually. Research clearly shows that 6 air changes per hour can decrease respiratory infections by over 80%, almost equivalent to the effect of universal masking. An increase in infiltration inside the buildings where our staff and teachers spend 7 to 9 hours of their day can further reduce the levels of chronic exposure to fine particulate matter, or PM 2.5, which is responsible for asthma and other chronic health conditions, such as cardiovascular disease, arrhythmias, cerebral vascular diseases. PM 2.5 was found in a 2024 study to have no safe level of exposure, and that despite the EPA's safe upper limit, if the guidelines for levels of particulates exposure were cut in half in accordance with the World Health Organization's guidelines published 3 years ago, we could prevent 15% of cardiovascular-related hospitalizations. The potential for staff and health benefits savings alone should be motivation to act. It was estimated that it would cost just over $200,000 to install a portable air purifier in every single classroom across the district. If every dollar spent results in a $9 return on investment, as this research suggests, the district will net a savings of $700,000 in the first year alone. The annual maintenance costs for the replacement filters are estimated to be less than $20K per year. Our taxpayers asked the school board to find ways to cut expenses. Air purifiers would be a smart investment and do just that. Our South Hill community is willing to serve as a pilot study. Thank you.
Thank you. Justine Vosloo.
Hi again. I'm also speaking about the air purifiers initiative at the South Hill Elementary School. And as I said, my name is Justine Vosloo, and I'm a parent of 2 children at that school. As you've heard, various viral illnesses impact and spread in indoor air. We also know that bacteria like strep A can also spread in indoor air when speaking, coughing, or singing indoors. And while surface cleaning and hand washing are really important, these steps do not address one of the primary and most neglected aspects of illness spread, and that is air quality. We can learn from Boston Public School District which updated their HVAC systems to 3 to 4 air changes per hour, just like ICSD, and then went a step further and added an air purifier into every classroom. They also suggest that their teachers crack one window by 4 inches, and they use real-time CO2 monitoring, and every teacher, every community member can log in and see what's happening in the classroom for the duration of the school day. So they can tell what the CO2 levels are for their students. They can see that the CO2 levels stay below 700 parts per million, even when the room is fully occupied, which helps them reach that 20 liters per second per person of fresh air and clean air that's required or suggested by ASHRAE 241. We're asking that the school district please act on this today, because as you just heard, our families are really being impacted by respiratory illness right now. And this is not just our school, it's across the district and it's across the country, but there actually is a science-based solution to this very issue. 6 air changes per hour. And it's not a lot, right? I've heard a couple of administrators say, well, that's what hospitals do. And that's true. That's the old ASHRAE 62.1 standard, which is 6 to 7 air changes per hour in hospitals. The ASHRAE 241 standards for infectious disease control recommends 12 air changes per hour for hospitals. They've doubled it. They're also suggesting that schools should double hours. So we're really asking the district to look at this and to acknowledge that, yes, regulations are going to take a while to catch up. While we would hope that the state or federal government would act on this science and implement these changes and provide funds for us to do this now, it's probably not going to happen for a while, in case you noticed. The reality is we have to take action here. And so we're asking for the school district to please let us take action as parents. We're willing to do this, and we're willing to support other parents across the district too. We hear the concerns around equity, and we acknowledge that this may not be possible for every school, but that's where the district would hopefully be willing to step in, acknowledging that it's only $200,000 here. And the possible return for investment is 9 times that. We will partner with other PTAs and other schools and support their efforts too. We hope to provide a clearinghouse of resources for them so that they also know how to find these air purifiers and how to implement them into schools. We'll support them with fundraising and some of the ideas that we have at our PTA as well. We want this to not just be an initiative for our school, we want this to be an initiative for the entire district. And we hope that Ithaca City School District would want to follow the science just like Boston Public Schools did, and hope that you will act on this information. Thank you.
Thank you. And last, Kim Lazaro. Okay. Is there anyone else who wish to speak who did not sign up or thought they had signed up but didn't? All right. That's it for public comment for tonight.
Okay, we could entertain board responses.
I cannot thank you all enough for coming here. A lot of people know that one of my children has multiple disabilities. One of them is an immune system deficiency. So when I mask, I'm masking so I don't get sick to protect him. He is sensory issues, so he doesn't want to wear a mask. And I wish we had air purifiers in every classroom. I agree that it's a necessity. And I, as an individual board member, will do everything I can to support this effort and figure out what we can do to make this happen, because y'all are right. It's not going to get any better anytime soon. And it, honestly, as someone who loves someone who is very vulnerable, it is terrifying. So thank you for speaking out.
Additional responses?
Thank you very much for coming, and thank you for always coming and bringing this to our attention. I think the first time it was brought to our attention was probably early part of last month. And just to note, for those in the audience who may not know, as well as viewers, that we have been acting on this. We have continually doing studies. We've had discussion about it at our facilities committee, which meets on a monthly basis, and even have some dashboards up at South Hill to monitor. And it might not be in every class, but at least there's been some start. And one thing I always want to remind everyone, especially when it was stated, the chronic absenteeism across the board in the district. That is unfortunately, it's a nationwide problem. And we were even just discussing at the curriculum committee prior to this meeting about it, because that's one of the goals in like the comprehensive improvement plan that we're working on throughout the school district. Yet knowing that we, and I think, and our facilities person had done some investigation as to looking at like some of the reasons why, if it was the air quality and all. So we are actively investigating, working with the South Hill principal and our facilities team to just look at things. But note also, even if you can't go back to last month's facilities meeting to just see some of the responses, that it's not strictly so easy to say, yes, let us get this entity to purchase for one school only, although we were given chronic absenteeism number across the school district, we have to look at all schools. But yes, we're employing and doing this pilot program and investigating since South Hill was brought to our attention. So please note that we are actively looking at this, and we haven't said no to this proposal.
Yeah, thank you everyone for coming. Appreciate you taking the time and expressing why this is so important. Yeah, on the surface, I mean, I do support air purifiers. You know, I definitely come from a more technical background. So like my concern is like electrical load and, you know, future needs of the buildings, because it's not just the cost of an air purifier. You know, it could potentially be something that costs, you know, each school hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars to upgrade the electrical systems. So it is a lot more complicated, in my opinion. So I think for me, you know, as long as the buildings do have the electrical load, number one, if the individual classrooms have the electrical load, there's fire code, you know, each circuit can only handle so much electrical load. So you might run into issues where one classroom can have an air purifier, another can't. And I'm just hypothetically speaking, I don't know if that's the case, but I think these are things that need to get looked into. And you might have, you know, a building, you know, like Lee Martin, where they can't do it because of, you know, their electrical constraints. So it is, I think, a little bit more complicated than just supporting it, because I do support it. I think, like, you know, my concern is just the future needs of the buildings. And, you know, there are state mandates that we need to uphold in terms of, you know, things change. So, you know, I just want to make sure that if that happens where, you know, we do need a lot more electrical load for a building, that we would potentially have the option to remove the air purifiers if need be. So, and I think the other thing too, I expressed at the last meeting, is just making sure that the air purifiers aren't disruptive in any way to students because of noise. You know, and if there is kids with like sensory things, like, I don't know if there's a humming, and I don't think there is, but again, like, I'm just kind of like throwing things out there. So as long as, you know, kids aren't being disrupted, and you know, as long as I think the district had the ability to potentially remove the air purifiers, if the buildings do need like additional electrical load in the future, I mean, I would be supportive of it. So, but yeah, I think there's more to it than just like plugging something into the wall. So I just wanted to kind of share that. So.
Were you going to say something, Emily? Or?
I'll keep it short because I know a lot of people have spoken, and I'm assuming that all of you have listened to the facility meetings for the last 2 meetings that we've had opportunities to talk about this. I feel like I've asked a lot of questions of our exec team and administration and other experts who have come to speak at the facilities meetings. We have talked about electrical load and gotten other questions answered. I personally, as a single board member, feel like we have gotten all of the answers that we need in order to, for me to feel comfortable approving something like this. I want to call out specifically both Irie, am I saying that right? Ari, and Justine this time too, of just, acknowledging that, of course, this is a whole district-wide issue. I appreciate your acknowledgement that this would be something that would be benefiting one school at this point, and recognizing that there are opportunities both to use it as a pilot to inform what other schools are doing, and also to offer to be able to actually help them in their own advocacy if they choose to do that. I think that that's extremely important. And so I appreciate coming from that perspective of it being a bigger issue. I'm hoping that we can bring it to the full board very soon as a vote. I haven't personally been getting a lot of new information. And so I'm hoping that at least at this point, we can either find out if there is specific new information that we need to get that we haven't already gotten from the district, or if we can move forward and take a vote on it. I will say though, to Todd's point, what we're really talking about here is the removal of changing a policy basically to allow for air purifiers. And I think that, to Todd's point, we need to be very thoughtful about the language that we put in so that we are protecting the district, so that if there were unforeseen consequences or policy changes that happen in the future, that we can then make changes or ask to have them removed or other things. And it would require you all knowing that if you're making a financial investment, that you're running that risk of having them removed if something were to come up that required that to happen. So the language, I do think, is not as simple as just, yes, you can do it, or no, you can't. But I do think that at this point, unless we get new information, we should move forward and allow you all to get a yes or no answer.
I'll get you in one. Yeah,
I was
go ahead.
saying, I don't know if we allow student reps to respond during
No.
board response time.
Well,
So they are
Okay.
allotted their time.
You can, okay, that sounds good. Yeah, and also I really appreciate everybody coming tonight. I really appreciate kind of all the scientific evidence and information that you presented both at the facilities committee and tonight, talking about cost saving, health benefits. I'm also generally supportive of it as well. Of course, there's some logistics to consider, but if you're keeping track of numbers of board members and where people stand, I'm generally supportive as well. Any other board comments, responses? Okay. Well, thank you very much. And we are going to move on to agenda item 3.3. That's our student reps.
So it's only been 2 days since we've been back from break. So we only have a few updates, but we are back to using reusable plates in the cafeteria. So up to when break started, we had been using paper plates, but now we have reusable ones. And the reusable collection bins have all been located around the school now. And then the Morocco trip happened, and it lasted for 7 days over midwinter break. And there's been a lot of exciting photos posted on their social media page, which we are hoping to share soon. And then there's a Music in Our Schools combined band concert next Wednesday in Culp Auditorium starting at 7 p.m. So it'll feature the middle school bands from Boynton and DeWitt, as well as both of our high school bands. And it'll end with a combined piece with all of the 7th to 12th graders playing together. Just super exciting. And then the spring fling for 9th and 10th graders is this Saturday, March 1st. And we still don't have mirrors in the bathrooms of H building. I think the first time we brought this up was last April, because they were stolen by someone and there haven't been replacements yet. So that's just something I want to mention again.
Hi, it's really great to see everybody tonight. First, I'll just say I don't mean to shirk procedure. By no means am I insinuating that I am a board member, but I figured I'd give it a shot. And we'll see. And we'll see what happens. So now that this is technically my procedural time to speak, yes, I'm going to harp on that. I'm going to mention something really quickly. So again, I can't vote and I probably shouldn't be able to vote. But from a student perspective, I'll say that, well, I think Mr. Fox's point makes a lot of sense with regards to, the necessity of looking into carefully how this could affect an electrical grid overload, based on some minimal research that I've done, admittedly, and the several previous meetings in which these ideas have been discussed. It seems to me, and I could be very off on this, but it seems to me that one of the major arguments against pulling back this restriction on having air purifiers is that it wouldn't be accessible to all schools in the same way. And I get that equity of access is a very important issue and it's something that we have to look into. But it feels kind of like saying that someone can't improve the health of their area because other people's areas might not get improved. So then we all just have to not get improved. I just think that that's an interesting, I think that's a bit of a problem because in what I've seen, whenever we put up barriers to letting anyone get something because we're afraid not everyone will get it, then it actually just kind of detracts from the total health experience. Again, I could be a little bit or very wrong on that, but those are the positions that I'd seen. And as a student who goes to these schools, who's seen a lot of these initiatives get passed through and the same language get tossed around, I don't mean that in a derogatory sense, but get the same language be used. It seems to me that it's not necessarily, it's while a well-intentioned argument, not necessarily the most logical if we're looking at it from anything like a utilitarian perspective or anything like that. But onto lighter things. I'm hoping I didn't just flame myself. So the update on the 8th grade scheduling video I've been talking about, I've been meeting with the counselors. I have a couple more meetings to go. One of them with Ms. Hilsdorf, the department leader for music and art. But yeah, the fire alarm went off yesterday morning. That was another thing. And there were some construction issues which caused that. We talked about it with Ms. Hardesty. It shouldn't be a severe issue, but it's similar to what's happened in past years with some smoke alarms that are detecting dust particulates or things that they're really not intended to pick up. So that's just something else I wanted to mention. And then there's an athletic update as we always do. So let me see, there were pole vaulters who set new records. There was a freshman who ran the 4th fastest 1,000 meter time in school history. We had a new freshman record in the weight throw. Riley Hubich holds the top 3 as well as 6 of the top 7 3,200 meter times in school history. And he set a new school record. We've got a fastest 1,600 meter runner. We've got a sophomore runner who was named New York State Sophomore of the Year with her cross-country performance this fall. And then in terms of teams, we have a JV basketball team with a perfect season, a varsity basketball team that just finished, as well as the girls varsity basketball team, boys and girls varsity basketball teams. The girls JV basketball team also recently finished. The varsity boys ice hockey team had a plus 500 record. The varsity girls ice hockey team also finished their season at a record of 4-6-1, lost in sub-regionals. And boys swim are now 3-3. And for varsity wrestling, we had a wrestler get his 100th career win and took first place in the stack tournament. And we had another wrestler finish second in the girls stack tournament. I think that's everything.
Okay. Hadestown is happening, the musical, this weekend at IHS. Tickets are free. Several students were wearing crazy getups for Theater Spirit Week. Shows for Hadestown are on Friday, the 28th at 7 p.m., Saturday, March 1st at 7 p.m., and Sunday, March 2nd at 2 p.m. Our Science Olympiad team, which is a relatively new club with middle and high school members, just made it to state. On March 14th, Administrators and some teachers from LACS are joining other New York Performance Standards Consortium leaders to visit the School Without Walls in Rochester, the only other consortium school of 38 in New York State besides LACS that is not in New York City. The purpose is to look at curriculum and the PBAT process and see some of the classes there.
Yeah, and as some may remember, before the meeting, right before the break, I talked about the mission statement conversations we've been having at ACS. Those are have continued. We got lots of feedback on the proposed mission statement, and hopefully in the next few weeks we will form a lunch meeting and finalize a statement for a full school vote. Hopefully all that will happen before spring break. And then a PBAT update, at ACS, we are further entering PBAT territory. English PBATs will be presented by juniors and seniors who need to complete their requirement on the afternoon of March 13th. The PBAT process is very unique in the fact that students write an essay and then defend their thesis, which is not something you typically do in high school. And science PBATs are also underway with experiments, many classes being conducted or wrapped up in the next few days, and essays being finalized in early March.
Thank you so much. Board responses?
Just want to say how much I appreciate you all. And Katem, thank you for not only your thoughts, but the comic relief, much needed. So thanks.
Okay, if there are no other comments, thank you guys so much. We're going to move on to agenda item number 4.1, which is the approval of our consent agenda. And the floor is open for motions.
Motion to approve all consent agenda items listed in consent agenda, somewhat redundantly. Consideration of accounts, personnel report, and minutes of previous meeting as presented.
Second.
Moved by Jill, seconded by Aaron. Any discussion, questions? Okay, then we can call that to a vote. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, the motion passes unanimously. Okay, that brings us to, we have 3 items for business tonight. Our first item, item 10.1, is a presentation by the ITA, and we're going to invite down Aurora. Aurora, are you Roger? Okay, sorry about that. I was debating. Okay, Aurora Roger and Entourage will be coming down, members of the ITA. So come on down.
That's the thing, yeah. Grab a seat. We can pull one.
Hi, everybody. Catherine Cernera, president of the Ithaca Teachers Association. I'm going to pass the microphone around in a second to let my colleagues here all introduce themselves as well. We know each other fairly well at this point, but we are really excited tonight to speak with all of you about the collective bargaining agreement negotiations that we entered into starting last month, give you all an update of some of the agreements we've already reached and a little bit of letting you and folks at home who maybe have not been tuning in for the long form version of our negotiations, give them kind of an overview of what we are hoping to accomplish in this process. So I'm going to just pass this down and pass it around, and then we'll move on.
Hi all, I'm Carrie Glenn Keogh. I teach math at Ithaca High School, and I've been in the district for a long time.
I'm Aurora Roger, and I teach humanities at LACS, and I'm the secretary of the ITA.
Hello, I'm David Isley. I'm 6th through 8th German at Boynton and first vice president of the ITA. I'm going to
Hey, I'm Brian Goodman, a teacher at Northeast. Hey, I taught Dan's two kids and Aaron's one of Aaron's kids. This is exciting.
I'm Gary Isaacs. I teach science over at LACS, and I'm also a union delegate and a building rep. I do. All right. So we're all working towards a common goal to develop the most supportive and sustaining collective bargaining agreement that we can.
Okay, and we are really excited because as the ITA and as the district, we have agreed to a very new form of bargaining, new to ICSD, which is transparent negotiations, also known as open bargaining in other places, but we like new names on new things, I guess. So what does transparent negotiations mean? The first and the big thing about it is that it is open to the community to observe. So most of our bargaining sessions will be taking place in the afternoons and evenings to allow greater access, particularly for our teachers who are working all day, but also others as well. And ICSD Communications will advertise meeting dates, times, locations, and there will be a live stream of all the bargaining sessions, and those that have already happened are already up there with a YouTube link so that you can watch them. And we're going to collaboratively publish written meeting summaries like the board meeting summaries. And our next session is going to be on Thursday, and it's going to be a spicy one. So I would recommend tuning in.
Hey, we're also open to any ITA employee that's teacher in the district, any ICSD employee, and any community member. You're welcome to either watch live, come in person live. There's rules of the room to follow, but we are open to be observed.
So the rules of the room are not a ton of kind of rules, but because this is a new process, it's important to have an understanding and make sure meetings run smoothly. So people who are at the table as bargainers are the people who will be speaking. If either side has invited guests, they also would be speakers. Anyone in the kind of gallery section before they come in would sign that they agree to the rules of the room, which means they wouldn't be speaking in the middle of the meeting. But if they want to write notes so that they can get that information to the people who are bargaining, there's a process for that to happen so that it doesn't disrupt the room and people are agreeing to come in quietly and respectfully so that things don't get disturbed and can keep moving along. Did I miss any key notes? I think that's all right. We're perfect.
So we are publishing all of the dates. We have agreed to try to accomplish the task of finalizing this agreement through 2 meetings a month. We may, as we get a little bit closer to the end of the year, may find that that is not yet sufficient time, may add more time if we need to. The real goal is that in order to ratify a successor agreement to our collective bargaining agreement before our agreement expires on June 30th, we would need to put it to an all-member vote and then bring it to the board for ratification. So we're working backwards from a June 12th deadline because that is the last possible day that could get all of that done before we all go away for vacation and before our agreement expires. So we've been backwards planning from there, like good teachers do, on how do we reach that final date by the date that we need to get there and how do we get it all done. So we're really hopeful about that. And as Aurora said, this Thursday from 4 o'clock to 8 o'clock, we have an upcoming negotiation session. And this is very timely for all of you because you have to pass a budget. You have to approve a budget to put forth to the voters soon. So this is the conversation where we will be spending a lot of time talking about salary asks. So anyone who's interested in teacher salaries should tune in this Thursday. Ooh, exciting.
And who isn't interested in teacher salaries? So We wanted to, for the next part of our presentation, talk about what it is that we as teachers would like to get out of this new collective bargaining agreement. We had a really great, really democratic process that took over a year, learning from our members what our needs were. We've been under a very long contract, so there are a lot of things that have risen to the surface in this 6-year contract. So our slogan is that teacher working conditions are student learning conditions. We didn't make that up, but we do love it. I think, I heard just the end of that curriculum meeting, and it seems clear that when there's teacher turnover, it impacts how we're able to implement curriculum. It impacts our students negatively. So we want to retain teachers. We want to have the best teachers for our students. And so to better support our students, ourselves, and our community, here are the things that we need.
So I've got the hot topic of the night, and that is health and safety in our classrooms, right? So first ask, we want safe, clean, well-maintained classrooms where we can interact with our students, right? Maslow before Bloom.
One of the things that we heard really, really extensively from our teachers, and then also we heard it earlier in the curriculum meeting, is about the length of time of our school day. We have teachers who are struggling to implement the curriculum that we have in the time that we have, but more importantly, the work of teaching goes so far beyond the time that you spend directly instructing a group of students. There are myriad professional responsibilities that teachers need to complete as part of their work. And we have not seen an increase in the time to complete those professional duties since before we became a full inclusion school. And the reason that I bring that up is because that is important, because when we became a full inclusion school, we made every solo project a group assignment, but added no extra time to complete those assignments in. So one of the things that we're really hoping to be able to have some robust conversations about are, how do we use the time that we have to get students what they need, but also to get the adults who need to interact with one another in ways that they can't when students are in the classroom? How do we get them the time that they need to be able to support our students? And how do we get everybody the professional development that they need to do their work really well? So time to work while at work, big priority.
All right, the next one is health and leave benefits that work for working families. This one is personal for me. I'm hoping to have a family soon, and we currently do not really have maternity leave or childcare leave that is paid. So we are really excited about a couple of our proposals that will make our district easier for working parents and for everybody, because all of us have teeth and also bodies that require care.
And not all ITA members are teachers that lead classrooms. Many of them are speech pathologists, occupational therapists, guidance counselors, social workers, librarians, and more than that. So we need to ensure manageable workloads for these teachers that include time to plan, carry out their plans, support inclusive practices, which directly and indirectly support all of our students' needs, a lot of diverse needs. So very important.
Our most important piece that we want to bring to the table is talking about teacher salaries, specifically teacher salaries for mid-career and late career teachers. That's the teachers represented here at this table. The students here in the audience, students at home, anybody watching, has experienced many teachers leaving the ICSD. When we ask our own members, why did you leave the ICSD? The biggest answer is salary. When we ask our members, what's the most important issue for you to bring up at contract negotiations, the biggest issue is salary. We have a salary scale that currently plateaus, and so we are not competitive with the districts nearby as we get into our mid and late tier. We have a plan to fix that. We have the means to fix that. We have the budget to fix that. It needs to get done. So that's our biggest goal, to make education better for all the students in the district.
And I'm going to bookend with our final priority, and that's about strengthening the partnerships that we as the Ithaca Teachers Association have with the district. We often have to work together with central administrators to problem solve. And though we may come at problems from a different tact, we have the same goals, right? We want to address problems and we want to address them quickly and in a way that best meets the needs of everyone so that our teaching staff can be doing what they're here to do and working with students. So, finish us off.
All right, we're going to close with a big thank you to you all for having us tonight, but even more for charging Dr. Brown with pursuing an increased contribution from Cornell University. We're so excited that you all made that step. We're so excited that Dr. Brown wants to do that, and we're like just thrilled, and we want to keep working with you all. And for everyone watching, there's lawn signs available, $10. They look like this. They're really cute. You might have seen them around town. Yeah. You can talk to us afterwards.
Do you want to do questions or do you want us to say thank you and leave? It's really at the discretion of the vice president.
Well, I will say thank you, first of all. Yeah, I think if anybody wants to ask a question or make a comment, certainly open to that. And if nobody has any questions or comments, we can not.
I think that the questions, I mean, as everyone knows, the negotiations are such a sensitive topic. I don't feel like there's any questions that might be appropriate, but I do want to really greatly thank you and really just point out how exciting it is that these conversations and negotiations are able for everyone to watch. It's going to be, it's really innovative, and it's another thing that I think ICSD and ITA, we should all be very proud of. So thank you.
We're really excited about that as well. I just the other day, colleague said, who I've worked with for many, many years, said to me, she's like, I've been working here for 25 years and I didn't know what happens in negotiations, and now I do. And she was very excited.
Well, thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
I was gonna ask some questions.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah.
I wasn't. I was sure.
And that brings us to our next item, which is item 10.2. We're going to be having a discussion, an initial discussion about the 2025-2026 academic calendar. It's not a voting item for tonight, only a discussion item. I thought Mary Grover was possibly coming down, and I am right. Come on down.
Thank you. So for the initial proposal of the draft calendar, there are a couple of key points. One is we want to meet the New York State educational required minutes. So this current calendar allows for up to 3 snow days. We also have our past practice has been 187 days. For educators, so it also reflects that. It is also in sync with our TST BOCES calendar that was approved earlier this year. And so we did that with intention, had them come out with their calendar first so that our students wouldn't miss out on any programming. And I want to thank Lynn Klankowski, who does a lot of the calculations, and Emily Tracy Arm, who holds a lot of the institutional knowledge of every year to year, the calendar. And I'm happy to take any questions. Yes,
Question,
Dr.
Mary.
Tripp.
Question about whether there's anything in particular we should look at here. Any big changes? It doesn't look like there are any to me.
There are not.
Okay.
I have one question, Mary. You know, with the caregiver conferences for the middle schools, I know that it's a half day. right? And I also know that there's a huge demand for those conferences. Is there, what is stopping us from being able to have a full caregiver conference day for the middle schools? To allow for more conferences and whatnot?
That's a great question. I'd have to follow up with Lynn on the educational minutes for that, and also building leaders as to the logic, as to why we've kept them as half days.
Thanks.
Yeah. So stay tuned. I'll take note of that.
Oh, sorry, one more question, I guess. Because a lot of, when will this be submitted for like public comment for Let's Talk? So people, a lot of times the public wants to weigh in on proposed calendar. When will that be out so folks can look at it and give us feedback?
We can have it up now.
Okay.
Yeah. For the community's review and feedback. I love there are students in the audience taking note of it.
Other questions?
Just a comment. I know that district conference days are highlighted in yellow and down below it says no school. But can you also include next to the days, no school in parentheses?
Yes.
Yeah, just
Okay.
to add that.
Yep. Yes, I see that inconsistency. Thank you.
Okay. Well, if there are no, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I have one last question, and I'm so sorry, everybody, but just one more question. Looking at the Regents exams, the students that do not take Regents exams, what do they do on those days? Are they able to go to school? What typically happens?
No.
They stay home.
No, the students attend school based on their Regents exam schedule.
So if they're
So-
not on the standard diploma track, then they stay home on Regents exams.
Correct.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, I do.
Erin had a question about the half-day conference days at the middle and high school, and I just checked our minute calculation, day calculation. If we were to make those full days at the middle school, we would be under our 3-day buffer for school days, for snow days, for grades 7 and 8 in those schools. So there's different requirements based on grade levels. And because our 7th and 8th graders don't start until a day later, it affects that. So we could do one full day and one half day, but we could not accommodate 2 full day conferences for middle school.
I guess I just wonder if we can get feedback from teachers about that, or I wonder what the feedback is, because I know how in demand those conferences are, and I'm wondering how that is impacting teachers, students in general, and if that's something we should re-examine. Period. Full stop. Thanks.
Before Catherine even jumps in, I'll just say that it's a complaint that I've heard many, many times this year about people not being able to get those get conferences, and therefore weren't able to check in with teachers until the spring, where it's yet to be seen, I think, if they're even able to, but thank you, Erin, for raising that.
So Catherine Cernera, ITA president. I have not spoken with our middle school educators about this year. However, for the past 2 years, our middle school teachers have requested that we get as much time for caregiver conferences as we possibly can. When we first started doing this, it was like afternoon with a PLC on a Wednesday, which was just very, very challenging. In general, there was one time where we had a full day, I believe, and middle school educators responded really, really favorably to that. So I could do a formal survey, but I feel pretty confident that the answer would be middle school educators would be happy to accommodate a full day if it were possible.
Okay, I guess that concludes that discussion for tonight. Since everybody left the table very abruptly. Our last item for discussion tonight was item 10.3, a conversation about the budget, and I will invite Lisi down to the table.
Good evening, everyone. As you know, we're easing into the budget process, and as we do that, I thought we would share with you some of our preliminary budget factors as they relate to revenue. We'll continue to do that as they're refined. So the first time we met with you, we shared with you the preliminary runs for state aid. And I kind of want to show you where we are with those and kind of talk through the other three major areas for revenue, just kind of give you a heads up of where we are. So we'll move on to the next slide if we could. Oh, we have the clicker.
It's way down at the end.
Yeah.
Way down at the end.
Oh.
Sure, it's a clicker. See if I can figure that out.
Keep working.
Maybe I can't. Let's go. Oh, there we go. All right. So I'm going to start really with the bigger picture, the overall picture of our revenue. I think this has been shared several times, at least that's my knowledge from the past. Just where our revenues come from and the three major areas. I just want to share that with both the public and of course the board. I'm sure very aware. Just the three major areas. First, state aid. 25% of our revenue comes from state aid. About 5% from miscellaneous income, and we'll talk a little bit more about that and what that looks like in the upcoming months. And of course, the largest portion comes from our local tax levies. And again, I think it's important to also make clear that state aid and those local tax levies, it's all the same tax dollars. It's just how it's distributed and collected. So that's important to share. So I'll start again with state aid. I know I've talked about this before. There's a couple refinements that I wanted to make folks aware of. First of all, foundation aid. That figure hasn't changed yet. I would anticipate some change in April when we get our finals. We're still kind of waiting for a clarification in terms of the formula and if that's changed. I know we're hearing a lot of conversations about that, but nothing definitive as of yet. But we're hopeful that that will increase. We did.
That's an estimate of what you think it might increase.
This is actually still the preliminary runs from the state, so that figure is still the same from what they gave us initially. There's been some talk about the formula changing. I hope that's the case. So,
okay,
but we'll stick with that. Some of the expense-based aids, I do want to talk about that a little bit. We did mention that the building aid was probably likely to change by April. That's driven by our use for as an example. So one of the figures we'll see there is the 24-25 budgeted figure, a little over $5 million. Okay. And then in 25-26, that shows us $3.1 million. And that really is based on our use and the timing of some of our projects. I know we had a $120 million project at one point, and when we submit for aid, so a lot of that can be adjusted in the end. But for budget to budget perspectives, it's important to look at that because when we created the budget in 24-25, that was the figure that was used. In 25-26, our estimate is 3.1 million, but we do anticipate that going up a little bit at the end. But when you're doing a comparative analysis between the two budgets, it's important to look at those two figures and the difference. One of the reasons I bring that up is because it sort of neutralizes the overall state aid impact when you look at those numbers at the end. Where we anticipated a $2.8 million increase, that can negate that a little bit overall. So we're looking at about a $1.2 million increase if that stays the same. I don't anticipate that being the case, but it is possible. So I want to show sort of the worst case scenario at this point as we refine the figures. That can be a lot, but we'll again, if this changes and as it changes, we'll share that with you. Any questions in terms of state aid? The rest of this really hasn't changed much, and we wouldn't anticipate that being the case. I almost clicked my computer. So the second area here is our miscellaneous revenue. Generally, that's about 4 to 5% of our overall revenue. But I did want to share this with you. It is about anticipated to be about $6.7 million. And the areas to the left there is what constitutes our miscellaneous income. We'll dig into this a little bit more towards the end, but just to give you an idea of what that looks like and where that revenue comes from. Also, one of the areas I'd like to share with you is our federal support and aid. And what that is generally derived from is our, or what we use federal aid for is our title grants, for example, our lunch program, IDEA. That's what our federal aid helps support, particularly Title I. That's about $5.2 million. Now, that's not part of our overall revenue picture because it's grant funds and it's allocated to specific areas, but I did want to make you aware of that. And we'll share what some of these figures are here toward the end. The third area is our revenue from, I did click the computer, didn't I? That's great. The third area is our tax base, our tax levy. And of course, we wanted to discuss our tax cap. That responsibility lies with us to develop that calculation. It's for those who may not know what the tax cap is or where it's derived. It's a New York State law that sets a threshold for what school districts can impose as a tax. And that calculation, it's a very complex calculation. Emily's going to share that with you and kind of show you how we came up with that figure. The 25-26 tax cap was calculated at 3.76%. For those who are interested further in how that's derived, we've added a great video that the Capital Region BOCES created about the tax cap and how it's calculated. And that's in our FAQ section on our website. And I would highly recommend folks take a look at that. But I'll turn it over to Emily. Emily, if you wouldn't mind kind of sharing how we came up with the tax cap.
Okay.
Look, I did it right this time.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so you start, I'm not going to go through this line by line. I'm just going to give you an overall view. You start with the prior year tax levy, and then there's a tax base growth factor, and that just puts a value. It's a state-driven factor that puts a value on our area and our value of the property in our area as compared to the rest of the state. Okay, so that is a set. That isn't something we set. And then you take into consideration the pilots that we have this current year and what we anticipate. This is where it's a little foggy right now, and we will go out with an estimate on that one because currently we have 16 pilots that we actually bill. And then we have 12 other pilots that are given, it's calculated by Tompkins County and the city. And there are different types of pilots where some of them are based on income and expense. And those numbers aren't in yet, and it's until those numbers arrive. So usually there's a couple of them we don't get until April. So some of this is based on what we received last year. And it's a split between the school district, the county, the city. So I can't place an actual number on that until those numbers come to me. So that's where that number is still an estimated number, even though it's revenue we're getting in this year, it's still an estimated number. We have our capital exclusion. So that all involves what aid we're going to get, what types of projects we're going to be doing going forward. And that comes up to the 6,524,000 figure that we have in there. We work with fiscal advisors on that to estimate where we're going to be and what we can have in for that exclusion. And then it trickles down, and there you see that 2%. And that's where they made it very difficult on school districts when they started saying this was a 2% tax cap, because everybody thinks that that is what we can go up. And that's just a very small part of this whole calculation, where it's the consumer, it's a limit of 2%, or the rate of inflation is measured by the consumer price index. Okay. So if the consumer price index, the inflation rate is over 2%, it maxes at 2%. We can't go over the 2%. So when this first came out and they kept saying 2%, it was very confusing to the public, to a lot of boards, because it really trickles down and we get to 3.76%, which is obviously not 2%. So we've renamed it. I think they started referring it to as the property tax cap calculation, which is much clearer. But people still remember when this first came out, it being a 2% tax cap. Okay. So I always try to point that out to folks because it's very confusing. And those are the factors. The projected pilots is something I am still working on. I'm working with Jay on that. We had some pilots drop off. Again, that's kind of because of those 12 pilots that we had that we can't really focus on an exact amount. It's an estimate, and it's going to be an estimate going forward. Okay. So we're still working with Jay on that. This will be filed on Friday because it has to be filed. Our first run of it has to be filed by March 1st. So there could be a little tweaking between now and then. But this was our first thing until we hear back from Jay. Okay,
Thank you.
good enough.
Believe it or not, that equation's fun for us. I know it's hard to believe, but yeah. Any questions regarding the tax cap? Great. All right. The last slide I wanted to share, and let me share the assumption key points first. This is kind of the overview of revenue, where we are at this point. And there's some assumptions here that are important to keep in mind. First of all, for the tax levy, that's obviously to be determined. First, you certainly the board would want to review that and public votes on that at some point. So for reference sake, we kept it flat. You see the first line there, it says estimated real property tax flat from the current year of 25-26. Just to kind of have an overview, an overall picture of what the revenues would look like. In state aid, we've talked about that a little bit. Again, the building aid and expense aids are estimated. That's for lack of a better term, a bit of a moving target. So we use the worst case scenario there at this point. Our foundation aid may adjust. Certainly hope so, and I'm going to reiterate that. Our pilots, as Emily explained, are estimated, and our use of fund balance and reserves would simply carry it over from the current year to next year. And also, I just want to remind folks at the last meeting, Jay Franklin, the director of assessment for Tompkins County, was here and mentioned that our assessments are likely to stay flat. Property assessments are likely to stay flat for the next 4 years. That's a huge part of the calculation for the tax rate. It's an important factor. And also there's a possibility of a 1% tax base increase overall. Again, that's helps with that pie that he talked about and how that pie is split up. So those are the assessments the assumptions in some of these figures that we're talking about. So again, with state aid, we've talked about those figures and the other revenue, miscellaneous revenue, and our use of balance and reserves and carrying those over. You can see at the very bottom that only if things were to stay flat, we're looking at about a 1.04% overall increase in revenues. I like to start with revenues when we're talking about budget. It's good to know where you are before you begin deriving your expenses. So this again does not take into account the tax cap or any increases in that area. And with that, I will open up for questions.
Yeah.
Dr.
My question would be about the projected 1% increase in taxable revenue. Is that or not taxable?
New properties. The overall tax base.
The tax base, thank
Yeah.
you. Is that because of abatements that have run out of time, or is it just pure growth in the community, or what is the?
Great question. My understanding was growth, but I may be corrected. That was from the meeting we had with Mr. Franklin, but that was my understanding.
Okay.
What is that? Was that yours?
We had, I think, one abatement that expired this year that will not carry into next year. In the grand scheme of it, though, it's probably a very small.
That's what I
part
wondered.
of that
Okay.
1%, but yes, it could be both, depending on if the abatements are expiring.
It would be interesting to get from Jay a projection on expiration of abatements, because it seems like at some point with all of the development and all of the abatements, there would be a ballooning of expirations.
And we
wonder-
have that.
You do have that.
All the
Okay.
pilot agreements have an expiration unless for some reason something changes in the pilot, which is doesn't happen very often,
Mhm.
but it has happened on a few. But we do have the expiration dates on all the abatements.
Maybe we could look at that at some point, Garrick, if that in finance.
I just say my understanding from Jay's presentation is that it's both new construction and abatements, ending. You know, it's remarkable, given all the new construction in this community, that is only 1%.
Yeah.
Of course, you have to remember the new construction is the numerator, and then the existing inventory is the denominator, and the denominator is very large.
Right. Thank you.
Pleasure. Any other questions?
My always question these days is when I see the federal aid, I wonder, I know we don't have a crystal ball, but I also know that it's not looking 100%. Do we know if that is guaranteed for this coming school year and something to worry about next year? Or is this something that we already should be worried about?
That crystal ball I did not bring with me.
Oh,
Sorry.
darn it.
I wouldn't speculate with that, not just yet.
Thanks.
Right now, we have it, and we don't see any change there yet.
Good question. So just thank you for the
Sure.
information, and I have not spoken, obviously, with my finance committee colleagues or anybody, but my initial reaction, I'm curious what others think, is, this is a lot of good news. Things are looking nice. Obviously, I think we all wonder about our reliance on federal, but, if you look at, did I understand correctly, about 5 million, out of a roughly $160 million budget. So it's not, we don't want to lose that, but it's not as big a liability as I think many might have thought. So
I think something to consider is that these funds tend to flow through the state. And I wonder long-term if that wouldn't be adjusted if there was an issue.
So some of that state aid may ultimately be tied to, right?
Sure.
So, the crystal ball that we don't have, but, just part of this also came out in the finance committee. One reaction I would just share that came out with Jay's presentation is the stabilization of assessment rates, may have come at the cost of some precision. And there may be a period of time where we're not equitably allocating tax burden now, but at the same time, that provides a lot of stability for taxpayers, which I think may outweigh the precision. So I think it's just nice that people and people at home are not going to be hit with a surprise, at least for the next 4 years. So it's good. Anyway, so thank you. This is positive.
And when you say, when you make that comment about equitable, you mean in scenarios where sale prices of homes are going up significantly, but taxes aren't being raised on those properties for the 4 years, or I was just.
Yeah, I think that's right. So if, again, hypothetically, if neighborhood A is the hot neighborhood.
Right.
And we see sales prices going up 10% a year over 4 years, that would mean a 40% increase in assessed values that lucky residents of that neighborhood will not be assessed, right?
Yep.
So at least for 4 years, they will get a benefit, which will come at the cost of neighborhoods that are not as hot. And then presumably after 4 years, there'll be a catch-up period.
Right. Other questions or comments from the board? Okay, thank you so much. Okay, that brings us to our last few items, which are small. Upcoming dates of importance, aside from the high school musical that will be coming up, other important dates that we haven't talked about tonight. I didn't ask in the beginning if there are any modifications to the agenda, so I'm assuming now that we're at the end of the agenda, we don't have to worry about that. But if there are any other discussion items that haven't come up, this would be the time. Okay. Hearing none, we're going to go on to our last item, which is going to be a motion to enter executive session. Before I get that motion, just so everybody knows, we're going to go into the executive session, and then we'll come back just to officially end the meeting. But for all intents and purposes, this will be the end of the fun part of the meeting. Motions to be entertained.
Motion to enter into executive session for the purpose discussions regarding proposed, pending, or current litigation, collective negotiations pursuant to Article 14 of the Civil Service Law, and matters leading to the appointment, employment, promotion, demotion, discipline, suspension, dismissal, or removal of a particular person or corporation.
Moved by Jill, seconded by Aaron. All in favor? All opposed? Motion passes unanimously. And have a nice night.
Yeah, I was like,